everyone. I'm Joe Newmeyer, film critic for WOR Radio, and let's have a huge round of applause, please, for the amazing nostalgia. And now please join me in welcoming screenwriter Alex Ross Perry and Academy Award winner, 6-time Academy Award nominee, 2-time Emmy winner, Tony Award winner, and star of nostalgia, Ellen Burstyn. Thank you both for being here, and congratulations on such a beautiful, lovely, and contemplative film. It's one of the films that I've seen recently that really does what I feel like art always should do, which is make you think about things, kind of find ways inside of yourself. Ellen, I would like to start off by talking about, there's a passage in your beautiful memoir, Lessons in Becoming Myself, that sort of reminds me of this film in some ways. You talk about how using memory as an actor is, you kind of think of it as almost like another, I'm paraphrasing, almost like another archive that you have at your disposal next to a room filled with photographs and filled with scripts and filled with notes. You have your memory. I'm wondering how that sort of helped you get into the character of Helen and prepare for this film.
I don't remember.
That was a good joke.
No, I really don't, because it's not a set thing. It's a very amorphous kind of thing. When I get something as beautifully written as this is, thank you.
I can't believe I'm sitting here with Ellen Burstyn. So you're welcome, and thank you.
I sit with it and I let it go in, and it's like smoke. It finds the crevices and crannies inside my psyche, and things get awakened, and I have my own memories, and it's always a surprise to me what comes up, what writing touches off in me. And it's not like I go, oh yes, I remember that time when my house burned down.
Right.
It's something more amorphous than that, and it always surprises me.
And Alex, in terms of this beautiful script, and it's so deeply felt and so emotional, what were the origins of it? Well, what were its evolutions and how it came to you?
Well, the film's director, Mark Pellington, wrote to me with an idea that he had, a two-pronged idea. One was an idea to make an independent movie the way I had sort of been making them with my friends and peers, which is to say, you sort of know the budget before you start even putting the movie together. You back into a 3 or 4 week shoot, and you back into a budget. And he said, I want to do it like you're doing it, because he had seen a movie of mine that we made in 12 days. Wow. And I told him the budget, and he said, I got to do that. You have to teach me. And right away I said, anything. I mean, I love explaining stuff like this. And then he said, here's an idea. I'm a very sentimental guy, and he is a very emotional and very earnest guy. And he said, I don't know if you are, but your work isn't. And I think that I want that dialogue between your sensibility and my own emotions to be what is sort of in the center of this project. And I was very intrigued by that, just because I also really liked his other films. And I just liked the idea of working with him. And I met him, and he seemed like the kind of guy I wanted to be working with. And I really wanted to be there for him to nurture the idea. And I believed in why he wanted to make the movie and the sort of experiences he's had. And it seemed like something that could be an interesting sort of depository for ideas that don't factor into anything I write and then make in my own movies. And then it's just kind of...
It's the subway.
You got to remember where we are.
Yeah. One of the beauties of the Angelica, that's right.
And I just really wanted to, collaborate with him, and I thought there was a lot interesting about putting something in the hands of another director, seeing how he directed the dialogue, seeing the actors kind of perform this stuff that I'm not responsible for on the day, and then getting to sit here and just watch it finished after seeing cuts of it it's kind of like making something without making it. Yeah. And I just really, I liked what he had to say about why he wanted me to be a collaborator on this.
This is actually the first. This is the first film of yours that you've written that somebody else has directed, right? What was it like, kind of writing something so sensitive and kind of putting it out into the world, hoping everything's going to work out okay?
Well, I don't know. It's only been out in the world for a day or two. I mean, sitting here and watching it after seeing cuts of it on my computer, I feel protected. Yeah. I feel like I can kind of hide behind the director and the actors, which is not true when I'm making my own movies. Not that I want to hide. I just feel like something that seems blatantly emotional. People have said to me, "Oh, it's so weird. That doesn't seem like anything you've done before. That must have been Pellington's idea." And if it was my idea and it's just an idea, I can say, "Yeah, sure, that was his idea." And I don't let on that it was actually my idea. I just never put it in one of my own movies.
Right. We'll come back to that in a second. Actually, I like that idea. Ellen, one of the beauties of this script is that the 2 or 3 passages that are these beautiful monologues. They're very theatrical, and for an actor, they must just sort of be catnip. When you looked at them, I guess for the first time, you mentioned last night there's like a 3 or 4 page scene, the scene at the house when we first meet Helen. That's 3 or 4 pages for you. What are your thoughts as you're reading that for the first time and thinking this is going to be a terrific introduction to this character? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, it's unusual to get a script with a 3-page monologue. In a film script, you get that in a play, of course. But you also then have a week or 2 or 5 to memorize it. Whereas with the film script, you don't. You have to really drill it and get it down. And then Mark scheduled it, so it was the first thing I shot. So I came on the set and said, "How do you do?" And let me give you a 3-page monologue here. It was very challenging. I was actually a little nervous. It didn't turn out to be such a big deal because I really learned it. But it's not a good way to start a movie, to not know anybody on the set or know anyone's names or know the director of photography or anybody, and just launch into an emotional 3-page monologue. Thanks very much. But it worked out.
Yeah, and that's about average for a speech that I like to write.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's stuff like that all over everything I do.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But generally, I'm there to answer for it.
Uh-huh.
But in this case, no such luck. I just trusted that he would hire great people and that they would execute it perfectly. Which turns out that's exactly what happened.
Listen to you.
We'll take some questions from everybody in just a moment, but I kind of want to combine some of those things that you guys just said, which is your sensibility in your earlier films, Alex. Obviously, it's a little bit more wry. There's sort of a darker sort of humor to them. And last night, Ellen mentioned that there's the scene with John Hamm, which is by the way, let's have a round of applause for all of Ellen's amazing co-stars. John Hamm, John Ortiz, Catherine Keener, Nick Offerman. They're all fantastic. When they're sitting and talking about the ball, and John says that his wife is divorcing him, and Ellen says why with a bit of John. It gets a laugh because it's John Hamm, right? And then Ellen was saying that there were many ways to read that, and it's such a terrific moment. And there are moments I love that the humor comes out in such humane ways. So the question is, I guess, for both of you, in finding those moments, Ellen, that sort of work in sort of a lighter way, and Alex, those moments that sort of come out in very humane ways, was that a new exercise for you and something that's a good muscle to sort of stretch in terms of screenwriting? Ellen, yeah, you can start.
Did you get that question?
I think so. More a comment about the lack of humanity in my other movies.
Oh, no. There's plenty of humanity, yeah. But the humor, it's sort of, this is a movie where the humor comes out of very easy kind of human moments, and your other films, it's a little bit more, it's kind of a little more rolling, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of that is the value of collaborating with somebody else who pushes you to do something different. Also, collaborating with Mark, who's a very specific director and an incredibly visual director. His work in music videos and commercials speaks to this. So I knew that I kind of was there to be me, but I also knew that for every 3-page monologue I wrote, which is how I like to write, I then had to give Mark 2 pages of images because that's his favorite way to shoot. So I always was trying to kind of do what he was asking me to do, but also do what I knew he wanted without asking, which was give him the material to just kind of run around with the camera and grab images. And there's images in this movie that are just, they're not written. they're just incredible. Like the silhouette of you sitting in Las Vegas in front of the glass with the bag at your foot and the sun is setting. That's an incredible image. That image could stand on its own as a photograph. It could be the centerpiece of a 30-second commercial or a whole movie. He just has a knack for finding those images. So it was always trying to find character moments within this sort of rolling format where we don't get to spend a lot of time with any one person. The movie kind of belongs to many, but then also giving Mark what I knew he just wanted as a visual director, as well as a very empathetic human.
The moment he was referring to is when I ask him if he's married, and he says, not lately or something like that. And I said, why? And he said his wife left him. And my line is, why? But I read it, why? And the audience laughed, and I thanked them last night that they laughed, because it was the only laugh I would manage to get in that script. But, you know, John Hamm has got to be the most handsome man God ever created. I mean, he's just incredible. So it was fun to deliver that why that way.
Yeah. And because you are Ellen Burstyn, and we can see so much in just a simple phrase or two of your performances, one of the things I love is the scene with John Ortiz where you're talking about the ball, and there's a way you sort of say the ball with a bit of an eye roll, half smirk, an affectionate sort of sense, that just in that one line reading, we see 40 years of marriage between Helen and Ned in such a beautiful way that really is just, it jumps off the screen in ways that you're not even expecting. It's a beautiful moment within a film full of beautiful moments.
Well, that's really what you hope for, you know, that the relationship with the husband who doesn't appear and isn't described really, and we don't know very much about him, but that when you do talk about him, it's filled with the reality that the audience can read and understand who he was. So that's part of my work, is to create Ned, who is uncreated, and have that be real to me, so that when I talk about him, it's real to you.
Yeah, and the other, something that this movie does, which is hard in anything, is that a lot of characters in it meet other main characters for the first time. A lot of movies just sort of, by virtue of how they are, rely on pre-existing relationships. And a lot of the ones in this movie are so pre-existing as to be just within a family. And the way that you meet John Ortiz for the first time, you meet John Hamm for the first time, he then meets these other people later for the first, it just kind of moves along like that. And that gives characters an opportunity to kind of introduce themselves to who they're speaking to, but also introduce concepts to an audience, whereas you don't have to have a conversation like that with an actor playing your own son. There's no reason to introduce a new idea to that. It's unspoken. So then you can kind of do writing that is half unspoken between brother and sister or parent and child, and half nice to meet you, tell me about yourself, in a way that actually makes sense for the story and doesn't have people going, but we know about you already. Because she speaks to him differently than she speaks to her neighbors, and speaks to Hamm differently than to your son, Nick. So there's just a lot of opportunities to do that in this sort of, passing of the torch format.
Yeah. If anybody has any questions, shoot up a hand really high up, because we have got a lot of darkness and a lot of bright lights. And there's one right there. There's a microphone coming to you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much for the beautiful film. And it's a screenwriting question, because you co-wrote the film with Mr. Pellington. When you see a film for the first time, it's always a journey. So as we're watching the film, we're introduced to, I guess, the messenger, we might call him, the insurance fellow, and he moves from one person to another, and he starts tying the story together. And I'm wondering, okay, who is the central character going to be? How is the story going to move forward? And then finally we leave him as though he's introduced us to this world. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how the two of you came up with this structure, and what sort of other visions you may have had before you settled upon this very interesting structure.
Yeah, well, also, I mean, just, technically, so Mark and I are credited as coming up with the story together, and then I wrote it, because Mark was first to admit, I don't write. He says, I don't write, I don't do it, I never have.
Okay.
But he likes being there for the writing.
Did he just pass the story on to you? Or
Well, no,
did-
like I
yeah,
said, he
yeah.
came to me and said, I have a story. I have this kind of concept about these people. I've lost my father, I've lost my wife, I've lived my life in the shadow of these feelings, and I want to do something finally that really gets at that. And then I said, well, what about a claims investigator? And, what about this woman? And it's an opportunity, in my own movies, I've never written roles for a lot of these types of actors. So I got to say, let's try this. Let's aim for a man of this age and a woman like this kind of a character. And he was very open to all of that. But then also part of the idea of just let's make something small and let's make something that I can execute. He said, I'm going to make this movie this year. So part of that is, well, maybe if we make a great role, but maybe that person doesn't have to work for 5 weeks, maybe they work for 2, that increases the opportunity for an actor to really feel like they can come and be a part of something without putting their entire life on hold to be in a, independent movie. I don't know if that's actually true. This is how I always feel. But it's a smaller commitment, and then you can just kind of say to people, you're not in the whole movie, so therefore these moments are actually more important because you don't have 90 minutes with an audience. You have 30 or 40. And I just like that as a writer, and I like it as a viewer in movies. And it's more of like a short story kind of structure. And all that stuff just clicked for him. I mean, he didn't enforce that on me, nor did I demand that that was how it play out, but we just sort of arrived at that conclusion as a way of just passing the torch and kind of admitting that these stories are all just part of other people's stories.
Other questions? There were a few other hands. Yeah, let's start here, and then we'll go in the back. Yeah.
Hey, Alex, you just talked about thinking about the time commitments for the actors, and you had such fabulous actors. Ellen, you were incredible. I'm curious what the casting process was like for the film. If there were people you had in mind when you were writing, direct connections, curious what that was like, and Ellen, how you became attached to the project.
Maybe answering that would help me. Because I mean, I didn't have that in mind, and it really just wasn't my job. I mean, I'm sure Mark maybe had some people, but it's not like we said, we're going to write this for John Hamm, and first things first, we have to send it to him. Maybe he had that in his mind. I don't know. We never really had those conversations. It was more like this type of an actor. Think of this kind of a person. But then, he would list 10 people or just send me some old photograph of some person and say, this kind of a person, something from his collection of images. But, and then he just sort of went about casting it by, his wish list, I believe. I mean, I don't know how you came to him.
The script was sent to me through my agent with an offer, and I read it and liked the offer and took it.
There was another hand. Yeah, back towards on the left-hand side.
This question is for Ms. Burstyn. Thank you so much for your role in this film. As an actor, your life, I imagine, was somewhat gypsy-like, going from part to part, place to place. What is your relationship to things? What kind of things have emotional resonance for you?
I have statues. I have statues of icons like Buddha and Ganesha and Jesus and Kuan Yin. I like depictions of the sacred realm, the divine. I'm not limited to any one religion, but I like the idea of there being a field of archetypes that we can refer to. And so I have a lot of old statues, and I'm fairly attached to those. I try not to be too attached to things because I think it's not a healthy way to move through life. But, I had a big house and I gave it up and I got rid of a lot of stuff and a lot of stuff I liked. And it felt like the way you feel when you get a haircut. It felt really good. And I think that it's important to not be too attached, to be able to, I have someone in my family who's been sitting in the same chair for 60 years, in the same room with the same pictures on the wall. I feel like I'm choking to death if I'm in that kind of atmosphere. I like things moving. I move furniture around in my apartment in New York. And I let go of things, and I give things away. I like change, and I like the feeling that it's all temporary, and it's beautiful, and we can appreciate it and pass it on. So I try not to be too attached. The Buddha says we finally have to do the big letting go, so practice. So that's what I do.
There are a few more hands. I want to make sure we get everyone. They're right here on the right-hand side.
Could you tell me how the word saudade came about in the script? Was it part of the initial concept, or did it come about later?
That was a big Mark idea. That came in at some point, in the time of working on this, and you maybe experienced this throughout collaborating with him as well. Mark likes to send a lot of stuff. Like in the months I was writing this, I probably got 3 or 4 emails a week from him. This article, look at this article about children selling their parents' art. Look at this article about this neighborhood that burned down. Look at this, look at that. And at some point, oh boy. At some point he came upon a sort of like a passage or a poem or something about this, and it really resonated with him, and it was late in the game, and he just said, this is it, this is what it's about, we have to build to this. And we said, maybe the way into this is that an adult would be so aware of this that it would seem sort of obvious, and maybe if we put this kind of in the mouth of a younger character who's exploring the world for the first time, we can explain why such a sort of grand but familiar concept can seem so exciting to somebody. And yeah, he just really latched onto it and said, we haven't really known it, but somehow I've decided that this is what we were always talking about. And he was right. And it was just a nice way to kind of tie it all together, because he was, he's very curious, and he's not really resting on ideas. He's continuing to kind of look for new inspiration as drafts are finished, just because he likes reading things and sending articles and looking at pictures and, the poems in the New Yorker, stuff like that, like little things that he just finds seem to really resonate with him.
It's one of the fun things we can do as film fans, by the way. The film that won Ellen, of course, the Best Actress Academy Award. Alice doesn't live here anymore. Alice is selling, at one point early on, sells all of her things after she's widowed. They're on the front lawn. She and her son are getting rid of things as they're going to be leaving from New Mexico to California, and they wind up in Arizona. And it's one of those fun things to say, oh, look at that character, how she's handling it. Look, here's Ellen Burstyn as Helen in Nostalgia, and how she's dealing with loss and objects being gone. And I just think it's sort of one of those fun things as film fans we can say, look, there's that, and then there's that. I just think it's a fun parallel in some ways.
Oh, I like the way your mind works. That you remember that and hook them up together. That's great.
We have time for just about one more. If anybody has one, here's a question right here. Yep. There's a microphone coming. Here you go. Thanks.
Well, I want to know what's your beauty secret, because you're so freaking gorgeous. And I also want to know, when you play a part, does the character then live inside of you forever, or do you let it go?
Well, they're already there. I mean, I find them all inside.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I think we're each a hologram of the whole human race. We've got everybody in us, from Jesus to Hitler, and everybody in between.
So
and
like the Buddha thing, it just comes out. Like Buddha says it's there and you just bring it out or something.
Yeah, right. They're there. Every once in a while, some character will pop up, from the past. I go, oh yeah, there's Lois from last picture show.
And your beauty secret?
What'd she say?
Your beauty secret. Do you have a beauty secret?
Oh, my beauty secrets. Okay, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I exercise, and I eat healthily.
Yay.
So let's have a huge round of applause, please, for Ellen Burstyn and Alex Ross Perry. The film is Nostalgia. Thank you very much.